Hello and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Izolda. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Recently, I have been talking about, quite frankly, earned media. Let's call it what it is, right? Podcasters are out there doing their podcasts like me, and sometimes they are solo podcasts, or they might do it with a colleague or a cohort or a collaborator, and they talk about whatever it is they want to talk about. Many podcasts are interview-based. This one is sort of, right? I split between interview-based shows and also solo episodes. But if you have a message to get out, how do you do it, right? There are lots of ways. You can blog, you can submit to Harrow, help a reporter out, you can start your own podcast. But if you're not ready to start your own podcast, how do you get your message out on podcasts? Well, you pitch and you get on the shows. And so recently what I've been doing is I've been talking about and going over how to pitch a podcast host or a podcast producer, right? You're getting it right from the source. This is what I want to see when someone pitches me. Now, I have a process. For example, when someone pitches me and they say, oh, I have this perfect person. I get a lot of PR pros pitching me and they say, oh, I have the perfect person for your podcast. You should really have them on your show. And that's super cool, except for how do I know if they're the perfect person? Often they'll send me a press sheet. I'm going to tell you right now, do not send a press sheet PDF until I've asked for it. Until someone asks for it, a lot of people, for example, have their mail settings to basically trash or send to spam anything that has any kind of an attachment. So until I've said, hey, you know what? I'm really interested in having this person on my show. Don't send me a press sheet. Instead, follow my lead. And my lead is I have something called a podcast guest interest form that I ask every PR pro and every prospective guest to fill out in order for them to have a chance to get on my show. Now, I get like 20, 30 pitches a day because the show has gotten more popular and people hear about it and I talk about innovation. So I get lots and lots of pitches. But the problem is for a lot of these people is that my show is really specifically about creatives, people working to change the world in social impact, and people who are working in the conservation or the vegan spaces to, again, change the world for the better. So if you're not doing something like that, if you're a salesperson, unless you're a salesperson for a company that's doing solar energy or that's building the coolest new electric bike, like I've had on the show recently, I'm probably not going to have you on my show. I'm probably going to say no, thank you. So what I want you to do is to pitch me the way I want to be pitched, and that is to fill out the podcast guest interest form. And if I look it over and you filled it out and I love it, I might ask for your press sheet to have all the information. Then I'll go, here's the calendar, please select your interview date, and then we'll be off and running. Other podcasters do it differently. Other production companies do it differently. This is how I'm doing it. And I'm telling you this because in case you want to be on a show, you're going to want to have a process in mind, right? So you're going to want to create a database of prospective podcasts. And I talk about that in the last show about this. This series, by the way, is being called And My Next Guest Is, and it's about how to pitch these podcasts. So I talked about that recently, about how to find the podcasts you want to pitch versus sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. Instead, there's a process to find the podcasts you want to pitch, and I went over that in a previous episode. I'm going to put the link to the episode. This is episode 3 of this series. So I'm going to put the links to both previous episodes on this in the show notes for this. So yeah, you're going to find out what podcasts, and then you're going to do the pitch. And the pitch itself is super important. Now, here's the thing. This is going to be about the elements of a pitch. Now, I want to talk about my friend Gloria Chow. She is an amazing entrepreneur who helps people get earned media. That's what she does. And she has something she calls the CPR method. And unfortunately, I don't actually remember what the C and the P and the R stand for, but it's her trademark thing. And she talks a lot about relevance. Make it timely, make it relevant to the person you're pitching. Relevance is super important to me. If you're not relevant, as I've already said, I'm not really going to be interested in and by if you're not relevant, I mean relevant to my show. Obviously, you're relevant to something. That's not what I mean. And so, yeah, if your pitch is not relevant to my show and my mission and what I'm doing, I'm probably not going to be interested in having you on my show. But if it is relevant, woohoo, I'm going to be super excited. Timeliness, on the other hand, is not as important to me as it might be to a podcast or another media company or organization that has a much quicker turnaround, right? If you pitch me today, your episode wouldn't run until probably 2 to 3 months from now, if then, because I'm way far ahead. And so anybody who's going, oh, I have a book launch next week and I want to be on your show, I'm like, it's going to be old news for you by the time I can actually air your episode. So for me, the pitch is much more about relevance than it is about timeliness. And so, be aware of the kind of podcast you're pitching. So that's something that's super important, because if you're pitching, again, spaghetti up against the wall and seeing what sticks, you might miss the boat on finding something that is relevant and timely to what you're trying to achieve, whether it's a product or a service, whether you're excited about a cause, whatever it is you want to talk about, you want to be sure that you're pitching appropriately. Great. But how do you actually work that pitch? Again, as I said, for some, what you're doing now is going to be important, and you're going to hear me talk about this in the episode. For others, it's not as important for it to be timely. It's more important sometimes for it to be evergreen. I want someone who comes to listen to the show to find as much exciting information and relevance and compelling stuff in an episode that airs tomorrow. If they come next year or 5 years from now, I don't want it to matter. I want this to be the kind of content that people can come back to again and again. So timeliness isn't as important to me as it might be to another podcast. Bear that in mind as we talk about what are the elements of a pitch. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Izolda Trachtenberg. On the show, I interview peak performing innovators in the creative, social impact, and earth conservation spaces. I also bring you ideas and techniques that you can grab and use to set goals, create, and unlock your potential for changing yourself and the world. And now let's get to the show. Pitch elements. What elements go into a pitch? First and foremost, any connection you have. If you know someone who knows someone who knows someone, if, like from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, if your cousin's sister's best friend's husband's wife, blah, 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 knows a person who's got a podcast who you might be a good fit for, find out. If you have any kind of connection point to that person, say, hey, my cousin's sister's best friend's wife said blah, blah, blah. I would like to talk to you about being on your show. If you're timely and you have a point of view, you as an author, we all have points of view, but if you articulate it in your pitch, a podcast host will love you. If you're timely, if you are relevant to what they're talking about and also what's going on in the world, it's a beautiful thing to have. And I'm going to show you a successful pitch that I had that just recently got into an article, because I want you to see what I'm talking about. Your credentials, your skills, your perspective, and your comps. Your comps are so important. If you're pitching a fiction podcast, let the podcast host know what it is you're talking about, who it is that you are like. If you have a comp that you can relate to the podcast host, it'll give them information, because they want to have a great interview with you. They won't have a great interview with you if they don't know enough about you. It's got to be relevant to the show. We've already talked about that. Focus on the benefits you'd bring, not the features you have. And we're going to talk about the difference in a sec. And also, as part of your pitch, say, I would be delighted to email my list about the episode when it airs. That's more catnip to a podcast host, because this is a relationship, right? So not only do you get to go on their show and get access to their audience, but their show gets access to your audience. And saying that you would be willing to email your list is it's catnip to me. When someone says that to me, I would be delighted to share any assets you have. If you create graphics for Instagram or Instagram stories, just let me know. I'd be delighted to share them. Oh, thank you. And I do that too. When I'm a guest, I will absolutely share their assets. They'll create them. I'll share them on my stories or on my posts on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever. Anywhere I can, I'll do it. Why? It gets them access to my audience, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship because it also gets me a better reputation as a guest. It's perfect. Oh, and if you don't have a list, say that you'll be glad to post it on your social channels. You don't have to email your list if you don't have one. Just say, and I'd be delighted to post it on my social channels. Any of you who follow me on Facebook, you've seen that. I'm sure you've seen me go, I just did this great podcast, or I just had this great guest on my show. Every time someone's on my show, it goes on my social. Every time their episode airs, it goes on my social. Every time I'm on someone's show or I'm in an article, it goes on my social. It goes to my email list. I want everybody to know. Why? I'm building my audience. I want people to know that I have great guests. They provide incredible value. They're really cool people, and we have great in-depth conversations. What's not to love? I share that with my audience as much as possible, and they get access to my audience. I get access to theirs. Pitch elements. First of all, features versus benefits. If you want to sharpen what they call your elevator pitch, you want to focus on the benefits you're going to bring to the podcast. What would you say to someone who is hosting a fiction podcast to show the benefit that you would bring as a fiction author to their show? It's a tough question, isn't it? And it's a trick question because we haven't talked about it, but it's really important to think about. I'm going to show you a fun little difference between features and benefits. The feature is, I have a dog walking business. That's what you do. I have a dog walking business. But the benefit is I help busy dog owners have peace of mind because they know their precious pups are being well taken care of. Can you see how it's a difference? The features, I have a great fiction book. That's lovely. That's a feature. I've written this great fiction book. But how will it benefit the podcast host's audience to have you on their show? My fiction book is going to open up the way women use technology in the 20th century to change the world. If you're pitching any kind of fiction podcast that talks about tech, the podcast host will love you. So that's what we want to do as we're pitching, is figure out not just that I've written this great book, but how will my book benefit the people who are listening to this show? So to pitch successfully, you're going to tell me how you relate to me and my show. You're going to tell me your credentials, your expertise, why my audience and I should care. And you don't need to be promoting something to go on podcasts. You can just be a guest. But it makes more sense to promote something. And tell me why I should care now. So that means to me that someone pitching me because they really have something now that's really timely might not work, because right now, someone who is on my show and records their interview today won't be on until the end of February, early March. So if you have evergreen content, that's different than if you have timely content as far as who you're going to pitch to. If they come to me and they go, like the woman who's going to be on the show, not this coming week, but the next week, is going to be speaking at the World Health Organization, for example. So I snuck her in. Because the World Health Organization, the G20 meeting is starting October 28th or something like that. So I slotted her in October 25th, right? So if you have that kind of a timely, amazing topic, and her topic is close to my heart because she's an environmentalist, I went, yeah, I'm going to push someone back and I'm going to slot you in. And that can happen. But only if you're really timely and you have, a compelling pitch. Because remember, this is a relationship. It's a relationship. I'm going to take a second and I'm going to just read this to you because this is a pitch to a fiction mystery podcast. And this was a connection. I had a connection with this person, and here's the pitch. Hi, Linda. We met at the Maryland Writers meeting last month. I was the person who translated that Russian for you, and we chatted about my next book, The Tarot Card Murders. As I said to you then, with the police being under fire for their actions, we need a detective who isn't a cop. Cassie Belmont is a professional tarot reader, and when someone kills a woman and leaves the scene decorated like a tarot card, Cassie must catch the killer before he strikes again. I've read tarot for 25 plus years. The Tarot Card Murder sizzles with authenticity, romance, and mystery. It's Eve Dallas meets Stephanie Plum with tarot cards. I'd love to be on your show to chat about how I infuse tarot meanings and history into this mystery that will leave you guessing until the end. And the very last thing, I don't know if you can see, but it's something along the lines of, and I'd be delighted to email my entire list about being on your show. Thanks. Bye. Do you see what I mean? I gave how we know each other. I gave our connection. I gave the relevance to today, right? The police being under fire, blah, blah, blah. And I have my cred. I've been a professional tarot reader for, actually, it's over 35 years, but I come across as older than I am, being a 35-year professional tarot reader. But the point is that I have the cred and I have the comps. I have everything that to be on this show. Why would you not want to have me? Here's without a connection. Hi, I listened to your interview with blah blah and agreed when you said Jane Marple was superior to Hercule Poirot. I'd love to chat with you about Agatha Christie, Arthur Conan Doyle, and my own work on your show. With the police and the whole blah 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 blah. I'd love to be on your show to chat about how I infuse blah 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 blah. All of that same stuff is the same, but you can see how the very first part, I listened to your interview with blah blah, so they know I listened, and agreed with something so they know that I actually listened, and I pitch how I would be, it's fun to me that I went, and I'm kind of up there with Agatha Christie and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Obviously I'm not, but the whole point is that I gave that relevant, I sort of put that bug in her ear that it was relevant, that I could be as great as Agatha Christie and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Not because I am, but because I wanted to get that connection established as quickly as possible. And before that, I leave a review so that they can connect my name with me pitching. Do you see what I mean? It's a whole process, but you can do it pretty easily. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Innovative Mindset Podcast. Next week, we're going to have an interview episode. And the week after that, we're going to be coming back with episode 4 in this And My Next Guest Is series. So you can learn more and more about how to pitch podcasts. I'm going to be working on this probably through the holiday season. So you'll be able to pitch starting at the new year. You'll be able to pitch whatever podcast you decide is the best one to pitch. This episode has been brought to you by Brain FM. I love that app. This app lets me meditate. It helps me fall asleep. It helps me focus. It helps me create. I listen to it daily and all the time. And if you decide that you want to try it out for yourself, you can find the link to how to do it on the show note page of this episode. And also you can get 20% off the app if you decide to try it out. And yes, I am an affiliate, and I will get a small little kickback if you decide to try out the app. I encourage you to do it, even for just a month. See the kind of difference it can make in your life. It will help you focus and concentrate like nothing I've ever seen. I love it. And the episode is also brought to you by my book, Die by the Sword. It is the first book in the Cassie Belmont Tarot Reader Mystery Series. It is available at Amazon, and I had a blast writing it. It's going to be it's going to be the beginning of something beautiful. I love the story, quite frankly. I was shocked at how much I liked what I wrote. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. Anyway, I hope you check out the book, see something about it. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it at izoldatauthor.com/die-by-the-sword. And I'll put the link to that in the show notes also so that you can go ahead and grab it. And last but not least, if you want to support the podcast with a little tiny bit of bling, you can get stickers, you can get pins, you can get posters of the Innovative Mindset Podcast, plus some of the art that I have been doing in my year-long creativity project where I'm doing an art piece every single day. I know it's a lot, so I will stop talking. Anyway, I hope that you check out the show notes, see what you can see, learn what you can learn, and get in touch if you have questions. Until next time, I remind you to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Izolda Trachtenberg and is copyright 2022. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, remember to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind.